They told me I was mapping the boundaries of human perception. What they didn't tell me, what I didn't realize until it was too late, was that some boundaries shouldn't be crossed. We thought we were uncovering secrets about how the mind works. Instead, we opened a door we couldn't close, and unleashed something beyond comprehension. Every step I took felt like running from a shadow that was always one step behind, waiting for its chance to catch up. It's still here, always watching. Even now, even after everything we did to contain it. It knows I'm running. And it loves the chase. If you're ready to dive into a chilling tale about what happens when science meets the unknown, your reaction helps us share this story with more viewers who love creepy tales like this one. Let's see how far curiosity can take us, and how much fear we can endure together. My name is Dr. Elias Carter. For years, I worked at Eisen Lloyd Perception Lab, a place where science met philosophy, where we sought to understand how the human brain interprets reality. It wasn't just about seeing, it was about understanding what lies beneath the surface of perception. How do we make sense of the world around us? What does the brain notice? What does it ignore? And perhaps most hauntingly, what happens when it fills in the gaps? I remember sitting at my desk, surrounded by stacks of papers and data logs, the glow of monitors casting faint reflections on the walls. The lab was alive with the hum of machines, steady, unrelenting, almost comforting in its monotony. Whiteboards were covered in equations and diagrams, each one a piece of the puzzle we were trying so desperately to solve. We believed we were unraveling the mysteries of cognition, peeling back layers of complexity to reveal the truth. At first, it seemed harmless enough. Just another experiment, another step forward in our quest for knowledge. Visual processing, how the brain reacts to light, color, shape. Routine tests, predictable results. Or so we thought. But then, we found something we couldn't explain. Something that defied logic, shattered assumptions, and left us questioning everything we thought we knew. It started as a whisper among the data, a flicker on the edge of perception. A single anomaly that grew into something far more sinister. At the time, I didn't realize the weight of what we had uncovered. Now, looking back, I see it clearly, the moment when innocence gave way to dread, when curiosity turned into obsession, and when the line between discovery and destruction blurred beyond recognition. And that's when I began to wonder, was it really us who discovered Hyperion, or did it find us? The days blended together in a haze of routine. Subjects would come in, don their VR goggles, and sit quietly as electrodes mapped their neural activity. Monitors displayed streams of data, brainwave patterns, pupil dilation, reaction times, all seemingly ordinary. The lab was a symphony of beeps, clicks, and the soft whirring of machines. It felt safe, controlled, predictable. But then, it happened. One day, during what should have been a mundane session, a monitor glitched. Just for a second, a single pixel flickered, glowing with a hue that seemed to shimmer between existence and non-existence. It pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, like a heartbeat trying to break free from the screen. Did anyone else see that? Researcher number 1 asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. What? Just a glitch, researcher number 2 replied dismissively. Probably just the software. I leaned closer, my brow furrowing. Something about that pixel didn't feel right. It wasn't just a random error, it lingered, stubbornly refusing to fade like normal glitches do. The air around me seemed to grow heavier, thicker, as if the very atmosphere had become saturated with unease. The hum of the equipment grew louder, more pronounced, drilling into my ears like a warning I couldn't quite decipher. It started small, I said to myself later, staring at the footage replaying on my computer. A flicker. A glitch. Something no one thought much about. But then, it grew. At first, the changes were subtle. During subsequent experiments, subjects began reporting strange sensations, colors bleeding into each other, shapes distorting at the edges of their vision. On screen, the visual artifacts became more frequent, swirling patterns, jagged lines, hues that defied explanation. One subject squinted, rubbing his eyes as if trying to scrub away the image seared onto his retinas. I don't know what that was, he muttered, shaking his head. It's wrong. Like it shouldn't exist. Another recoiled in discomfort, clutching her temples as she described seeing flashes of an impossible color whenever she blinked. Her voice trembled, her hands shaking. This isn't normal, I whispered to myself, watching the recordings late into the night. Each new symptom added another piece to the puzzle, or maybe subtracted one, leaving behind only questions. What was this thing we'd stumbled upon? Was it even real? Or was it something else entirely? If you're feeling the tension building already, don't forget to subscribe to Eerie Short and Scary Stories so you never miss another spine-chilling story like this one. Plus, your subscription helps us keep creating content that gives you goosebumps. Because sometimes, the scariest part of a story isn't what happens, it's knowing there's more to come. And trust me, this is only the beginning. The subject sat rigidly in the chair, electrodes still attached to their temples, staring blankly ahead as if lost in some unseen abyss. Their voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with an emotion that teetered between awe and terror. "It's not like any color I've ever seen before," they began, their words halting, as though searching for language to describe the indescribable. "It feels wrong. Like it shouldn't exist. And once you see it, you can't unsee it?" Their hands twitched involuntarily, clawing at nothing, as if trying to grasp onto something tangible amidst the chaos swirling within their mind. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of machinery and the soft rustle of papers on my desk. My stomach churned as I watched them struggle to articulate what they had witnessed. I replayed the footage later, alone in the dim glow of my computer screen. The subject's face contorted with confusion and fear as the anomaly, what we would later dub Hyperion, manifested before their eyes. It wasn't just a color, it was a force, a presence that seemed to seep into their consciousness, altering their perception of reality itself. On screen, the visuals were distorted, waves of unnatural hues rippled across the monitor, bleeding into one another in ways no spectrum could explain. It was beautiful and horrifying all at once, a paradox that defied logic. We called it Hyperion. At first, it seemed harmless, an anomaly in the data, a curiosity worth investigating. A glitch in the system, perhaps, or a fluke in the equipment. But as the experiments progressed, the truth became undeniable. This was no mere quirk of science. This was something far more profound, and far more dangerous. During one particularly harrowing session, the anomaly manifested with unprecedented intensity. Vivid bursts of light erupted from the screen, pulsating with a life of their own. The subject screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the lab, before collapsing into unconsciousness. Their body convulsed briefly, then went limp, leaving behind only the eerie silence of aftermath. As I reviewed the footage afterward, I felt a cold knot form in my chest. The subject's eyes had widened in horror as the light consumed their vision, their pupils dilating uncontrollably as if overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of what they saw. They hadn't just been looking at a color, they had been experiencing it, on a level deeper than sight, deeper than thought. It was as though Hyperion had reached out, touched their mind, and left its mark forever. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a warning. A harbinger of something we couldn't yet comprehend, but which already threatened to unravel everything we thought we knew about the world, and ourselves. As I sat there, staring at the frozen image of that screaming face, I realized we had crossed a line. And there was no turning back. Dr. Mira Lang stood at the forefront of the lab, her figure commanding and resolute as she faced the team. The whiteboard behind her was a labyrinth of equations, diagrams, and hypotheses, each line meticulously drawn, each symbol carefully placed. Her voice carried an unshakable confidence, one that resonated through the sterile confines of the room. "This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for," she declared, her eyes gleaming with fervor. "If we can harness this phenomenon, imagine the possibilities. Imagine the doors it will open, not just for us, but for humanity itself. This isn't just science, this is progress. And progress demands sacrifice." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, daring anyone to question her vision. But I couldn't stay silent. As much as I respected Myra's brilliance, I couldn't ignore the mounting evidence of what Hyperion was doing to our subjects, and to us. "Mira," I began cautiously, stepping forward, my tone measured yet tinged with urgency. "Have you seen the reports? Subjects are experiencing hallucinations, panic attacks, some aren't even able to function afterward. Their lives are being torn apart by something we don't fully understand. How can we justify continuing when the cost is so high?" Mira turned to face me, her expression unwavering. For a moment, there was a flicker of hesitation in her gaze, but it vanished almost instantly, replaced by steely determination. "And that's why we need to keep going," she replied firmly, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "We're on the brink of understanding something extraordinary. Something that could change everything. Don't let fear hold us back, Elias. Fear has never driven innovation, it only stifles it. If we stop now, we'll never know what lies beyond this threshold." I stared at her, struck by the depth of her conviction, or perhaps her obsession. In her eyes, the risks were merely obstacles to overcome, sacrifices necessary for the greater good. But to me, they were warnings, signs that we had ventured too far into territory we weren't equipped to handle. Close up, my expression betrayed the turmoil within me. I tried to reason with her, to make her see the danger lurking beneath her ambition. But the more I spoke, the clearer it became that she wouldn't listen. To Mira, the pursuit of knowledge eclipsed all else. Ethics, morality, even human suffering, all secondary to the promise of discovery. I tried to stop her, I later reflected, my voice heavy with regret. I warned her. But Mira was consumed by obsession. To her, the risks were worth it. Worth every scarred mind, every shattered life. She saw not people, but data points. Not consequences, but opportunities. And I realized then that I was fighting a losing battle. Do you think Elias should have done more to stop the experiments? Let us know in the comments below. Engaging with our videos helps them reach more horror fans like you. Because sometimes, the scariest part of a story isn't the monster, it's the choices we make in the face of it. Our initial tests were meticulously planned, rooted in the principles of cognitive neuroscience. Using EEGs, we monitored neural activity by tracking the electrical impulses that coursed through the subjects' brains as they processed visual stimuli. Simultaneously, functional MRIs provided a deeper, more intricate look at brain activity, mapping blood flow and pinpointing regions of heightened engagement. The combination of these tools allowed us to create a comprehensive picture of how the brain responded to various stimuli, patterns of light, color, and motion designed to elicit predictable reactions. The setup was clinical, precise, and controlled. Subjects sat in dimly lit rooms, wearing VR goggles equipped with electrodes that measured pupil dilation and eye movement. Controlled stimuli flashed across their field of vision, geometric shapes, shifting hues, and patterns calibrated to specific wavelengths of light. These stimuli were chosen for their ability to trigger well-documented responses, alpha waves indicating relaxation, beta waves signaling alertness, gamma waves associated with complex processing. At first, the data followed familiar trends, behaving exactly as expected. The graphs displayed smooth, rhythmic lines, each spike or dip corresponding to a known reaction. But then, everything changed. It began subtly, a faint irregularity in the data that seemed insignificant at first glance. Graphs that once showed predictable patterns now exhibited erratic spikes, jagged and unpredictable. What had been orderly became chaotic. Neural activity surged in unexpected ways, defying established norms. Regions of the brain typically associated with visual perception lit up like constellations, but so did areas linked to emotion, memory, and even fear. It was as though Hyperion had awakened parts of the brain that should have remained dormant. Their brains weren't just reacting, they were reshaping themselves, I explained, my voice heavy with both fascination and trepidation as I reviewed the logs late into the night. Synapses firing in ways they never should. Neural pathways reconfiguring at an alarming rate. On screen, the charts told the story more vividly than words ever could. Gamma wave activity surged to levels far beyond anything we'd seen before, suggesting heightened processing as if the brain was grappling with something it couldn't comprehend. Delta waves, usually associated with deep sleep, appeared during waking states, hinting at a disconnection from reality. Beta waves fluctuated wildly, indicating a state of constant mental arousal bordering on distress. And then there were the anomalies, the sudden bursts of activity in regions of the brain that shouldn't have been engaged at all. For instance, the fusiform gyrus, responsible for facial recognition, showed increased activity despite the absence of faces in the stimuli. The amygdala, tied to emotional processing and fear responses, flared unpredictably, even when the subjects reported seeing nothing alarming. The hippocampus, crucial for memory formation, exhibited unusual patterns, as though it was struggling to encode experiences that didn't fit within the framework of normal perception. It was like Hyperion was rewriting their perceptions of reality, I continued, my voice tinged with awe and dread. Not just altering what they saw, but fundamentally changing how they interpreted the world around them. The boundaries between perception and illusion blurred, leaving behind only uncertainty. Each graph, each chart, was a testament to the unknown, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. As I stared at the data, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had unleashed something far greater than ourselves. The implications were staggering. If Hyperion could rewrite neural pathways, what else might it alter? Could it reshape not just individual minds but collective consciousness? And if so, what would that mean for humanity? The technical details painted a chilling picture. What started as a scientific inquiry into human cognition had evolved into something far darker, a confrontation with forces that defied explanation. The data wasn't just numbers anymore, it was evidence of a phenomenon that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality as we knew it. And as I sat alone in the lab, surrounded by screens filled with incomprehensible patterns, I realized that we were no longer observers. We were participants in a game whose rules we hadn't yet learned, and whose stakes were higher than we could have imagined. As the experiments continued, the effects worsened. At first, the symptoms were subtle, almost imperceptible to those unfamiliar with the growing menace of Hyperion. Subjects began reporting strange occurrences in their daily lives, colors bleeding into one another where they shouldn't, shadows stretching unnaturally, and fleeting glimpses of hues that seemed to shimmer just beyond the edge of vision. They described these experiences with a mix of fascination and unease, as though they were witnessing something extraordinary yet fundamentally wrong. Then came the disorientation. Subjects started losing track of time, forgetting simple tasks, and struggling to navigate familiar environments. One subject recounted staring blankly at a wall for hours, convinced it was shifting and moving despite all logic dictating otherwise. Another claimed to see faces in the patterns of wallpaper, each one whispering warnings about the color that haunted them. These whispers grew louder, more insistent, until the subjects themselves became consumed by paranoia and fear. By the time we realized the danger, it was already too late. The progression from mild discomfort to complete mental unraveling happened faster than any of us anticipated. Some subjects simply stopped showing up for follow-up sessions, leaving behind only cryptic notes or voicemails filled with fragmented phrases like, "It's everywhere now. I can't escape it." Others vanished entirely, leaving no trace except an unsettling chill in the air. The climactic scene arrived during what should have been another routine experiment. A subject sat strapped into the usual setup, electrodes attached, VR goggles secured over their eyes. The room buzzed with the familiar hum of equipment, monitors displaying steady streams of data. But then, everything changed. A sudden surge of activity lit up the screens, neural responses spiking to levels far beyond anything we'd seen before. The subject's body tensed, muscles locking as if bracing against an invisible force. Their breathing quickened, shallow gasps punctuated by sharp intakes of breath. Then came the scream, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the lab, cutting through the sterile environment like a blade. Hyperion manifested in full force, engulfing the room in blinding waves of unnatural hues. The colors weren't just bright, they were alive, pulsating and swirling as if driven by some malevolent will. Equipment malfunctioned one after another, monitors flickered and exploded in showers of sparks, cables snapped under unseen pressure, and alarms blared shrilly, adding to the chaos. The subject thrashed violently, their voice rising to a pitch that sent shivers down my spine. "It's here! It's inside me," they shrieked, tears streaming down their face. "Make it stop. Please, make it stop." Their words fell on deaf ears, or perhaps ours were already tuned to the cacophony of destruction around us. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as if the very walls were closing in. Hyperion wasn't just affecting the subject, it was consuming the space itself, warping reality in ways none of us could comprehend. When the commotion finally subsided, the subject lay slumped in their chair, unconscious or worse. The lab was a mess, equipment destroyed, papers scattered, and an eerie silence hanging in the air like a funeral pall. We had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. Feeling the suspense yet? Hit that thumbs up button if you're loving this twisty turn of events. It really helps us get this video in front of more viewers who crave scary stories. Because sometimes, the scariest part isn't the monster, it's realizing how far you've gone to unleash it. The tension between Mira and me reached a breaking point one evening, as the lab buzzed with the hum of equipment and the soft glow of monitors illuminated our faces. I couldn't stay silent any longer. The evidence was undeniable, subjects were suffering, some irreparably damaged, and yet Myra's resolve only hardened. "We can't keep doing this," I burst out, my voice cutting through the sterile atmosphere of the lab. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, every fiber of my being urging her to see reason. "People are getting hurt. This isn't science anymore, it's cruelty." Mira turned to face me, her expression calm but unyielding. She stood before the whiteboard, its surface covered in equations and diagrams that now seemed like cryptic warnings rather than scientific progress. Her eyes locked onto mine, piercing through my frustration with an intensity that left no room for doubt. "This is progress, Elias," she replied, her tone even but firm. "Sometimes progress comes at a cost. Do you think the pioneers of medicine or physics stopped because their experiments caused discomfort? No, they pushed forward, knowing the potential benefits outweighed the risks." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. How could she justify what we were seeing, the shattered minds, the vanishing subjects, as collateral damage? But I knew better than to expect sympathy from her. To Mira, the pursuit of knowledge was sacred, untouchable by moral qualms or ethical boundaries. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so it carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. "This isn't just discomfort, Mira. This is destruction. We're tearing apart lives, maybe even reality itself. Can't you see that?" For a moment, her mask slipped. A flicker of hesitation crossed her features, as if my words had struck a nerve. But it vanished almost instantly, replaced by the same steely determination that had driven her from the start. "And if we stop now?" she countered, her voice rising slightly. "What happens then? All this work, for nothing? All these sacrifices, meaningless? No, Elias. We've come too far to turn back now. If we succeed, we'll change everything. Isn't that worth the risk?" It was clear that no amount of pleading would sway her. Frustration boiling over, I stormed out of the lab, slamming the door behind me with more force than intended. The hallway outside felt suffocating, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the walls as I paced back and forth, trying to gather my thoughts. Desperate to halt the experiments, I sought allies among the other researchers. Some listened politely but ultimately sided with Mira, seduced by the promise of groundbreaking discoveries. Others dismissed my concerns outright, chalking them up to paranoia or exhaustion. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't convince anyone to join me in opposing her. I felt alone, I later reflected, my voice heavy with regret as I recounted those days. Helpless. Watching as the world unraveled right before my eyes. Every attempt to stop the experiments ended in failure. Myra's obsession blinded everyone else to the danger, leaving me isolated in my understanding of the truth. Each day brought new horrors, each report confirming my worst fears. Yet there was nothing I could do but watch, powerless, as the line between discovery and destruction blurred further with every passing hour. And as Hyperion continued to spread its influence, I began to wonder, not for the first time, if stopping the experiments was even possible anymore. The day the government agents arrived was both a relief and a nightmare. Their arrival signaled the end of the experiments, or so I thought, but it also marked the beginning of something far worse. The lab, once a hub of scientific inquiry, descended into chaos as armed figures in hazmat suits stormed through the corridors, their boots echoing ominously against the sterile floors. "This facility is under quarantine," one agent barked, his voice cold and authoritative. "Cease all operations immediately." Mira stood frozen, her face pale but defiant, as she watched them seal away our equipment, confiscating every shred of evidence related to Hyperion. Monitors were powered down, files encrypted, and samples locked away in secure containers. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that this was the end, that we had finally contained the horror we had unleashed. But I was wrong. As the agents swept through the lab, erasing traces of what we had done, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were too late. The damage had already been done. Hyperion wasn't confined to the lab, it had escaped, spreading like an infection into the world beyond. And now, there was no stopping it. In the weeks that followed, reports began flooding in, first locally, then globally. A montage of news clips and social media posts painted a picture of growing panic. People described seeing strange colors, hues that defied logic and seemed to seep into their minds, altering their perceptions of reality. Some claimed these colors whispered to them, driving them to madness. Others simply disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only cryptic messages scrawled on walls or recorded in frantic voice memos. Authorities remain baffled by a series of bizarre disappearances linked to mass hysteria, a news anchor reported, her tone laced with unease. Witnesses describe seeing an unnatural color moments before vanishing. Families grieve, communities panic, and experts struggle to explain the phenomenon. I retreated to my apartment, isolating myself from the world outside. The once familiar streets now felt alien, filled with shadows that stretched unnaturally and whispers carried on the wind. Inside, I pored over notes, searching for answers in data logs and research papers, hoping to uncover some way to reverse the catastrophe we had set in motion. But the more I read, the clearer it became. Hyperion wasn't just a discovery, it was a force, something ancient and incomprehensible that had found us because we dared to look too closely. Each night, I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee cups. My reflection in the window grew gaunt, haunted by the weight of what I had witnessed. Outside, the city buzzed with fear and confusion, its people grappling with a reality that had begun to unravel thread by thread. If you're on the edge of your seat, consider joining our community by subscribing and hitting the bell icon. You won't want to miss future episodes where we explore even darker corners of the unknown. Because sometimes, the scariest part isn't the monster, it's realizing how deeply it has already infiltrated our lives. The days turned into sleepless nights, each hour stretching longer than the last as I became increasingly aware of the subtle changes creeping into my surroundings. At first, I dismissed them as paranoia, shadows stretching just a little too far, reflections warping ever so slightly in the glass of my apartment windows. But deep down, I knew better. Hyperion had found me. No, it can't be, I whispered to myself, clutching the edges of my desk as if holding on to reality itself. Not me. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Fleeting glimpses of impossible hues began appearing at the edges of my vision, colors that seemed to shimmer and pulse with an otherworldly energy. They weren't there one moment, then suddenly they were, seeping into my consciousness like ink spreading through water. My mind rebelled against what it saw, trying to rationalize the phenomenon away, but the truth pressed harder with every passing second. One evening, while poring over old research notes, a package arrived without warning. It was unmarked, its contents wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside lay Myra's journal, a relic from the lab, untouched since the shutdown. As I flipped through its pages, my hands trembled uncontrollably. Each entry chronicled her growing obsession with Hyperion, her descent into madness masked by scientific jargon and feverish calculations. Her final entry struck me like a physical blow. Hyperion isn't a discovery, it's a force. It found us because we invited it in. And now, it won't rest until it consumes everything. I stared at the words, their meaning sinking in slowly, inexorably. We hadn't discovered Hyperion, we had awakened it. By tampering with forces beyond our comprehension, we had opened a door that could never be closed. The thought filled me with dread, not just for myself, but for everyone who might fall victim to its influence. As I looked up from the journal, the room around me began to distort. Walls bled with impossible hues, colors swirling and twisting like living entities. The air grew thick, heavy with an unseen presence that pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. My reflection in the mirror shifted subtly, revealing a figure that wasn't quite mine, features warped, eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. For a moment, I locked gazes with this distorted version of myself, seeing not just fear but something darker, more primal. It smiled, a cold, knowing grin that sent chills racing down my spine. In that instant, I understood. Hyperion wasn't content to merely consume, it wanted to transform, to reshape everything it touched until nothing remained of the world we once knew. And now, it had found me. The figure in the mirror smiles, a chilling, predatory grin that freezes my blood. Its eyes glimmer with an otherworldly light, and for a moment, I see not myself but something else entirely, a reflection of what Hyperion has made me into. I scream, a raw, primal sound that echoes through the room as the impossible hues of Hyperion consume my field of vision. The colors pulse and writhe like living things, spreading across everything, walls, furniture, even the air itself, until there is nothing left but chaos. My senses overload, overwhelmed by the sheer alienness of it all. Then, just as suddenly, everything goes black. Static fills the void where sight once was, crackling and popping like static electricity dancing across the edges of reality. A faint whisper cuts through the noise, sending shivers down my spine. You'll see soon enough. The voice is soft yet resonant, carrying with it the weight of inevitability. It feels close, impossibly so, as though it's coming from inside my own head. There's no escape, no reprieve. The last vestiges of normalcy slip away, leaving only dread. Reality is fragile. Be careful what you choose to see. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this unsettling journey, please give the video a big thumbs up and leave a comment letting us know which part scared you the most. Every reaction helps us bring these spine-tingling stories to more viewers like you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon for instant updates on new uploads. Until next time, sleep tight, but don't dream too deeply.